All right, all right. I want to first and foremost give all honor, glory, and praises to the Most High, whose name is Yahweh, right? That good and terrible power. And we do so by Sham Hamashiach Yahushai. Not by Shem, but by Sham Hamashiach Yahushai. It's your brother Sadiq back at you with another class, right? This is gonna be a crazy one. It's gonna be a roller coaster ride here, right? So brothers out there, go you might either want to go take this class outside, maybe you want to go do this class on a patio away from your wife, right? Or if you're bold enough, maybe go to your wife and say, hey, honey, you think I can I please get my balls back? Brother Sadiq is about to give a class, right? And he said I need a little bit of fortitude and masculinity for this class right here, right? But yeah, what we're gonna be talking about today is polygyny, right? And monogamy, right? So as always, let's open up with the book of Colossians, chapter 3 and verse 17. And whatsoever ye do in word or deed, do all by Sham Hamashiach Yahushai, giving thanks to the Most High and the Father by Sham Hamashiach Yahushai. So, we always got to bring the spirit in this thing right here, right? Because everything that we do, everything that we say, we got to do it all through the anointed Savior, right? Because this thing is a spiritual battle, first and foremost. Before anything is physical, anything is carnal, it starts with the spirit, right? So we must always bring that spirit into everything that we do. So we're going to bring that spirit into this lesson right here, right? So let's go on and get into it, right? Let's get right on into it, right? Like I said, brothers, ask your wife, can you have your manhood back for this lesson, right? Because you know what? Women actually, they love masculinity. When you actually put your foot down and say, damn it, woman, and you pull her and say, this is what we're going to be doing, that kind of turns women on a little bit, right? So you got to be that man. Women don't want to be that, women don't want to be the ones making those decisions and stuff, right? They want a man to step into his rightful place and say, this is what we're going to be doing today, right? This is how things are going to go. They want you to take the lead, right? So this class is going to be about polygyny, the historical norm we erased. Okay, an ancient practice. The history of marriage is a complex tapestry woven from diverse cultural, religious, economic, and social threads. While monogamy is the legal and cultural standard in most of the world today, it is by no means the only marital structure humanity has practiced. Within the broader category of polygamy, the practice of having more than one spouse simultaneously, the most common form throughout history, has been polygyny. The practice of one man being married to multiple women, it is crucial to distinguish this from polyandry, the much rarer practice of one woman having multiple husbands, and from group marriage. Polygyny has appeared on every continent and in a wide array of societies, from ancient empires and nomadic tribes to agricultural communities, often serving specific functions related to lineage, labor, political alliance, and social status, right? And as you come into the room, I know this is being streamed on multiple platforms. Please like or either dislike, right? But let your yay be yay and nay be nay, right? Let's get this information circulated, right? Because we have to get out of this place. This place is about to be finished. So like or either dislike, whatever platform you're watching this from. Some of the earliest written records of human civilization contain evidence of polygynous relationships, particularly among the elite. In ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, marriage was a cornerstone of society, primarily aimed at ensuring the continuation of a family line, while monogamy appears to have been the common practice for the general populace. And we're going to get into all of these things right here. Polygyny was a recognized option for royalty and the wealthy. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest deciphered legal texts, 1754 BCE, addresses situations arising from a man having both a primary wife and a secondary wife or concubine. Often a second wife was taken if the first was unable to bear children, as the production of a male heir was a paramount social and economic importance. This demonstrated that polygyny was not an unregulated practice, but was integrated into the legal and social framework of the time. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, the pharaohs and high-ranking nobles frequently maintained a harem consisting of a principal queen, several secondary wives of lesser rank, and numerous concubines. The principal queen held a distinct and powerful position, and her son was typically the designated heir to the throne. For pharaohs, these multiple marriages were also a vital tool of diplomacy. Marrying the daughters of foreign kings or regional chieftains was a common way to seal treaties, create powerful alliances, and maintain stability within the empire. For the common Egyptian, however, monogamy was the overwhelming norm, likely due to the significant economic resources required to support multiple households. Thus, in the ancient world, polygyny was often less about personal desire and more a pragmatic tool associated with power, succession, and statecraft. So that right there is laying out the format, right, of polygyny, how it was pretty much around the world. Right now, let's see what our ancestors did, the Hebrews, because that's what we call ourselves, right? We call ourselves Hebrew Israelite, Hebrew being the language and Israelite being the people. So the Hebrew Israelites, we actually have customs and laws that we have to and that we must abide by, right? So patriarchs and practice in the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament, presents a society where polygyny was an accepted reality. Let me repeat that again to the Hebrew Israelites. The Hebrew Bible presents a society where polygyny was an accepted reality, practiced by its most foundational figures. This is what we must understand and get, right? We can't say that we're going to return back to our culture, but certain aspects of our culture we're going to kind of just overlook and say, oh, yeah, you know, it's about how I feel. This ain't about how you feel. This is what the Most High instituted and put into place, right? It's some laws that, hey, I may personally not want to do it, but the Most High says, you know what? You will do this. You have to do that, right? And we're going to show through the scriptures that in certain aspects, polygyny was actually mandated, right? It says the narratives do not present it as an anomaly, but as a part of the social fabric, often driven by the critical need for heirs. The first recorded instance of polygyny appears shortly after the story of creation. In the lineage of Cain, we find Lamech, who is introduced with the words, and Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah, right? I'm going to go to the book of, I didn't put this one on the slideshow, but I'm going to go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 25. And you can follow along with me. Actually, you know what? Let me share my screen so y'all can see this real quick. Let me share my screen with this verse right here. Bear with me. Bear with me while I pull up my screen, because I didn't put this inside of the presentation, but it just came to mind. So, let's see, stop screen. Let me share this screen real quick. Share screen, Deuteronomy. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go to Deuteronomy 25, and I'm going to start at verse 5. It says, so this is polygyny, right? Being mandated by the Most High. And we're going to show other verses as well. It says, if brethren dwell together, and one of them die, and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Oops. Oh. It says, let me start over here. Deuteronomy 25. If brethren dwell together, and one of them die, and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband her husband's brother shall go in unto her and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of an husband's brother unto her. So let's stop right there. So if a woman, she has a husband that dies and she now becomes a widow, it is the obligation of that brother of the deceased to now marry his wife, right? Now, that man could already be married, right? He could already have a wife, a family. Right here is obligated that man go into his deceased brother's wife and make her his wife now, right? Let's see what happens if he refuses to do that. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. So that child that comes of that new marriage, that child will now be named after the deceased brother. This is law right here. So you got to take this up with the Most High if you have an issue with it. It says, and if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders. So now they must present themselves to the elders, right? And check out the video by the elder priest on respect to the elders, right? Because it goes all about talking about the elders and the council and all that type of stuff, right? But it says, and if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders and say, my husband's brother refuseth to raise up unto his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. So this is the grief that the widow can take up with the elders, the judges of the city, right? It says, then the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him. They say, hey, what's going on, brother? Why don't you want to take your brother's wife? It says, and if he stand to it, he says, you know what? I just don't want to do it, right? I just don't, for whatever reason it may be, who knows, right? He can say, hey, my wife don't want me to have another wife, right? Because his Most High is his wife, so his BAL, right, which means LORD, that's his power. So he's listening to his power, his wife, right? And he's bowing and bending the knee to his power, his wife, and his wife says, no, you cannot have another woman, right? Let's see what the elders are going to do. And if he stand to it and say, I like not to take her, he said, I don't want to take her. Then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders and loose his shoe from off his foot and spit in his face. Right? One more time. And spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man that will not build up his brother's house. When you spit in somebody's face, that's a sign of disgust. That's a sign of disrespect. That's a sign of that you are just unworthy. This is what should happen to that man right here. Let's read on. And his name shall be called in Israel, right? Not just amongst the neighboring community, right? But in Israel. So no matter where he goes, if he goes to Jerusalem, if he goes to Bethlehem, if he desires to go to another a country, right? Amongst Israel, let's see what his name is going to be called. The house of him that hath his shoe loosed. Oh, man. Shalakia. And his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him that hath his shoe loose. That will be his name in Israel right there. So that's a serious matter. It's a serious matter for a man not to take his brother's wife. So get around that right there. Find a way to get around that, right? So let's move on. The practice is central to the stories of the patriarchs. Abraham, the progenitor of the Israelite nation, was married to Sarah, who was barren. To secure an heir, Sarah followed a recognized custom of the time and gave her Egyptian handmaiden Hagar to her husband. You see that? This is a sister giving this is what you call sisterly love right here. She said, you know what, my husband, I can't have a baby with him. I'm gonna give my handmaiden Hagar to him, right? As Genesis 16:3 states, in Sarai, Abraham's wife took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abraham had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abraham to be his wife. This union produced Ishmael and also the first recorded instance of strife between co-wives, as Sarah's jealousy towards a fertile Hagar became a source of great conflict within the family. And we're going to cover that too, about jealousy amongst wives, right? The tradition continued with Abraham's grandson Jacob, whose story is inextricably linked to his two wives, the sisters Leah and Rachel. Jacob's marriage were complex, and he fathered the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel through his two wives and their handmaidens, Bilhah and Zilpah, whom he also took as wives. And just a quick sidebar, Ephraim and Manasseh are actually the grandsons of Jacob. Those were Joseph's two sons. That's just a little sidebar. Those were Joseph's sons actually though, right? So it says, this extensive family, born of 4 different mothers to one father, became the very foundation of the nation of Israel. The account continues through the period of the judges. Gideon, a celebrated judge who delivered Israel from the Midianites, had a large family indicative of his high status. And Gideon had 70 sons of his body begotten. 70. Put it in the chat if you know how much 70 is. Put it in the chat what 70 is, right? So everybody can know. Let's see if y'all on point. Put somewhere in the chat what 70 is. It says, for he had many wives, and that's Judges chapter 8 and verse 30. These narrative examples demonstrate that polygyny was a well-established practice in the formative centuries of ancient Israel, deeply intertwined with matters of lineage, family, and social standings. It was not a fringe activity, but a strategy employed by the very patriarchs and heroes of the faith, right? Laws, kings, and wisdom on polygyny. While the narratives show polygyny in practice, the Mosaic law, the Torah, that's what we, our guidelines, what we say that we follow as being Israelites, that's our litmus on what's right and what's wrong, is the Torah, right? It says, does not prohibit it for the general population. Instead, it provides regulations to manage polygynous households, protecting the rights of the wives and the children involved. So we have guidelines behind this. You can't just go have multiple wives and think you're going to do whatever you want to do, right? There's laws and there's guidelines behind these things. If we want to call ourselves separating from the ways of this world, that means we have to separate in every way possible, right? It says this suggests an acceptance of the practice coupled with a desire to mitigate its potential for injustice. One key law is found in Exodus chapter 21 and verse 10, which stipulates the rights of the first wife if her husband takes another. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. This law codifies the husband's responsibility to continue providing for his first wife's material and conjugal needs, preventing her from being neglected in favor of a new wife. So what this law is pretty much saying is that you cannot diminish what you already have set up with your first wife. So if your wife is used to living a certain lifestyle, let's say she drives a certain type of car, or she lives in a certain type of neighborhood you got to set up in. You can't now put her in the project somewhere because you got a second wife, right? You can't now have her driving a Pinto, right? And all my old school, y'all remember what a Pinto is. Y'all can't have her driving no hoopty, right? If she's used to driving a luxury vehicle. She's used to driving the Phantom, the Ghost, right? And now you want to put her in a Ford Focus, right? That's what this scripture is saying right here. She can't be used to eating filet mignon, and now you buying fruit from the damn dollar store, the Dollar Tree, right? And I gotta put a penny inside the bucket. I said the D word, right? But let's move on. Inheritance laws also account for polygynous families. Deuteronomy 21 verse 15 and 17 addresses the common issue of favoritism between wives. If a man have two wives, so this dealing with favoritism, right? Have two wives, one beloved and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated. And if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he hath. Right? This is modern day child support right here. Right? You have children with one wife. Y'all are, you're together, or you're not together anymore, or whatever. You still have to give a double portion to that first wife that you hate now, to that child, right? To that household, because you're not there no more as much, right? You're not spending as much time with that son or that daughter as much. So you have to give a double portion to compensate for your time that's lost, right? Man, I guess a lot of brothers, they must be sneaking watching this right here, because the numbers is going up and down for the views, right? Don't let your wife catch you watching this. Don't let your wife catch you watching Brother Sadiq talking about polygyny right now. It says, this law ensures that inheritance rights are based on birth order, not on the father's emotional preference for one wife over another. The law did, however, place limitations on certain types of unions and on the monarchy. Leviticus 18 and 18. Forbids a man from marrying two sisters simultaneously, and this law right here was actually established after Jacob, because I believe it was two sisters there, right? So this was before that happened, right? It says, furthermore, when establishing laws for a future king, the Torah explicitly warns against excess. Now, I'm going to pull up Deuteronomy 17. I'm going to actually start at verse, and if you want to jump in, Elder, by all means, please. I'm going to start actually at Deuteronomy 17 and, let me see. Deuteronomy 17, I'm going to start at verse 16. But he shall not multiply, actually, I'm going to start at verse 15. Deuteronomy 17 and 15. It says, thou shalt in any wise set him king over thee, whom the Most High thy power shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother. But he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Most High hath said unto you, ye shall henceforth return no more that way. Right? So the modern day horse, right, today will be your vehicle, your car, your transportation, how you get from one place to another place, right? We're going to get the understanding of Deuteronomy 17 and 17. It says, neither shall he multiply wives to himself. And this is a scripture that sisters will go to try to cut you up and say, you see that there? You see right there, brother? They won't even call you brother. They say, you see right there, nigga? You can't have another wife, right? It says you shouldn't multiply wives to yourself. It says it right here in the law, right? And they got you, right? But hey, Brother Sadiq gonna help you. It says, neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply himself silver and gold. So now let's go back up to verse 16 when it's talking about multiply horses to himself. So if you were to take this and say that means talking about wives, well, you also got to say, well, this is talking about horses, or today the modern day cars. That means the man can't have more than one car, right? You can't have more than one car. That car you have, that's the only car that you can drive, right? Your bank account better not go into the double digits. You better not multiply your bank account. You better not multiply your bank account, right? That's literally what you're saying. You better not multiply your bank account. You better not go into double digits on it, because that's against the law. That's what it means by silver and gold. So the context of what this is talking about in Deuteronomy chapter 17, in Deuteronomy chapter 17 and verse 17 is that Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. So don't multiply women to yourself that it turns you away from the Most High, from doing the work, right? This is what that is talking about, right? This is what that is talking about. Don't multiply wives where it turns you away from doing the work. So don't get a gang of wives and everything, and next thing you know, you stop teaching the scriptures, right? Next thing you know, you stop praising the Most High, right? That's what this is talking about. The practice was especially prominent among the monarchy. King David had multiple wives and concubines, which was accepted as a royal prerogative. So it's a man's actual prerogative to actually have multiple wives. It's his prerogative. That's what he chooses to do. That's what he chooses to do. If a man just wants one wife, he can have one wife. If a man wants to have no wives, that's his prerogative, right? It says the divine approval of this is made explicit when the prophet Nathan confronts David about his sin with Bathsheba. Speaking on behalf of the Most High, Nathan recounts the blessings bestowed upon David. And I gave thee thy teacher's house, or thy ruler's house, and thy ruler's wives into thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would moreover have given unto thee such and such things. So let's slowly digest this. It says, and I gave thee. The I is talking about the Most High, right? It's not talking about the wife. It's not talking about Nathan. It's not talking about nobody else but the Most High. The Most High he gives, and the Most High takes away. So the I in this verse right here is the Most High. It says, and I gave thee thy ruler's house. So everything that King David had was given to him by the Most High. So those wives that King David had was given to him by the Most High. Those horses that King David had was given to him by the Most High, right? All praises to the Most High, right? It says, and thy ruler's wives into thy bosom. So his wives, which is plural, this was given by the Most High. It says, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah, meaning gave them the kingdoms, northern and southern kingdom. And if that had been too little, he said, look, if that would have been too little, David, I would moreover have given unto you these such and such things. Since I would have given you whatever you asked for, right? It says this passage is significant as it frames David's acquisition of the wives of his predecessor, Saul. And let me know in the chat if I'm going too fast, right? Let me know. Tell me to slow down. You're going too fast. You know, I want to make sure everybody gets this, right? I'm not in a rush. You know, we're going to get through this class right here because this is actually going to be an ongoing series, not just on polygyny, but also on relationships in general, right? On how we need to fix ourselves so we can be able to walk hand in hand into the kingdom, right? So please let me know if I'm going too fast, and I will slow it down. It says this passage is significant as it frames David's acquisition of the wives of his predecessor, Saul, not merely as a consequence of succession, but a direct gift from the Most High himself. You see that? That's a gift from the Most High. His houses, the kingdoms, his wives, the money, or the gold, the silver, this is all was a gift from the Most High. So who are we to not accept the Most High's gift? Who are we to refuse the Most High's gift, right? King David's son, Solomon, that's right, all praise to the Most High. Basham HaMashiach Yahushai, that's right, that's right. King David's son, Solomon, however, serves as a cautionary tale. He famously violated the spirit of the law from Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 3 by marrying women of other nations. That was King Saul's issue. And we're gonna come back to Deuteronomy 7 and 3, but let's read 1 Kings 11 and 3 first. It says, and he had 700 wives, princesses, right? Those 700 wives, those were Israelite women, and 300 concubines. Those are lesser wives, women of other nations. It says, and his wives turn away his heart, meaning his mind. That's not talking about the Israelite women. Those concubines, those lesser wives turned him away, because then he started following after their idols, after their deities, after their powers. That's what King Solomon started doing. They turned him away. Now let's pull up Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 3. Give me 1 second. Let me share my screen real quick. Bear with me. And I'm going to leave it open at the end of the presentation for questions, for comments, for anybody that wants to that has something regarding the subject, the topic at hand, right? Okay, so let me share my screen real quick. Let's see, that's the stage. Okay, let's start with Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 1. It says, when the Most High thy power shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, right? And have cast out many nations, that's the key word right there, many nations before thee. The Hittites and the Gerasites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Most High thy power shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, meaning an agreement, nor show mercy unto them. So this was a commandment given to us by the Most High on what we should do. And it was for a reason why these things were supposed to happen. Verse 3, neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Talking about these other nations, these foreign nations. It says, thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. Let's see why. For they will turn away thy son from following me, meaning the Most High, that they may serve other powers. So will the anger of the Most High be kindled against you, because that's greatly offensive to the Most High, for his chosen people to be laying down with dogs, meaning these other nations. That's offensive to him. That's how we offend the Most High. It says, and destroy thee suddenly. So this is where King Solomon went off at. King Solomon had went off by following the powers of these foreign women, of these strange women. That's what happened with him, right? It wasn't because of him having multiple wives, but it was him having them lesser wives and concubines that had him go off, right? All right, it says the book of Ecclesiasticus, which is also known as Sirach, because I know we have some people on here that may not be familiar with some of these books. This is in the Apocrypha right here, right? The book of Ecclesiasticus, also known as Sirach, for example, warns of the disruptive power of jealousy within a household. Within a household. Neither consult with a woman touching her of whom she is jealous. And that's Ecclesiasticus chapter 37 and verse 11. This suggests a cultural awareness of the internal conflicts that were a common feature of polygynous families, standing as a practical commentary alongside the legal and narrative text, right? So yeah, these things can happen inside of polygynous households. And this is why this class is being presented, right? To show you the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? To show you that it is lawful, but there are issues, just like in any other marriage. In monogamous relationships, there's issues. So of course there are going to be issues in polygynous marriages, right? Does that make monogamous relationships unlawful? No. Does that make polygynous relationships unlawful? No, right? The information is just being laid out here to you, right? That's all we're doing. Christianity, Islam, and global cultures, right? The treatment of polygyny within the Abrahamic traditions, and this is what is commonly known as, the Abrahamic traditions evolved significantly after the biblical era. The New Testament, the foundational text of Christianity, And literally their foundational text is Galatians 3:28 and St. John 3 and verse 16, right? But just for edification purposes, we'll say the New Testament, right? It says the New Testament, the foundational text of Christianity, is largely silent on the matter. Hamashiach Yahushai did not condemn the practice. Nowhere are you going to find that in the scriptures of Hamashiach Yahushai condemning the practice of monogamy or polygyny. You're not going to find that nowhere in the scriptures, which was still present in Judea. However, the writings of the Apostle Paul have been widely interpreted as promoting a monogamous ideal. Now, this is where the problem comes about, because we understand that Paul's writings are sometimes hard to be understood to those that are unlearned, roughly paraphrasing. It says in his letters, Paul stated that a bishop or deacon should be the husband of one wife, right? Here go another, I got you. Here we go, right? We got you right here, Brother Sadiq. We got you. One wife. It says one wife right there, right? It's 1 Timothy 3 and 2, a requirement for church leadership that was widely adopted over time as the standard for all Christians. A significant factor in Christianity's shift toward mandatory monogamy was it spread into the Greco-Roman world, which legally recognized only monogamous marriage. This interpretation is not sound doctrine. And a chief reason why this is not sound doctrine is because the vast majority of bishops, right, of ancient bishops and modern bishops are not even married. They don't even have one wife. So if you want to go under the understanding of a bishop must be, let's go to the scripture actually. Let's go to the scripture. Let me pull that up first and foremost before we get into it, so we can break this down. Let me pull it up on the screen. Right, because we got to get this understanding. Let's go straight to that scripture. And then we're going to break it down, give you the interpretation of it. Let's see. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, so it reads, this is 1 Timothy chapter 3, and let's start at verse 1. This is a true saying. If a man desire the office of a bishop, he desireth a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. So let's stop right there on verse 2, right? It says a bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife. Now, I've done the research on this from the early church fathers all the way up until modern day. Very few bishops are even married because they practice celibacy. So in that aspect right there, they would not be keeping this epistle, because this is a letter right here. This is an epistle right here. This is not even law right here. This is an epistle, a letter, right? This is not written. This is not in the law nowhere. This is an epistle. So if you want to take it as being law, why don't you see across the board, by and by, bishops having one wife, at least just one wife, right? So it says the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, of good behavior. And we know these bishops they don't have good behavior. We know all of the scandals that involve the Catholic Church, right? That's not being of good behavior. Given to hospitality, apt to teach. So the understanding of this is right here. A bishop is a person that's in leadership. A bishop is a person that holds a certain role, right? And so with that role that's being held, that person must have integrity. That person must have a certain standard laid out for himself, right? Have a family at the least. So when it says the husband of one wife, that's meaning he must at least have a wife, right? In order to be a bishop. And we're going to prove that. Okay, let's describe. So understanding 1 Timothy 3 and 2. In the theater of public life, right, where perception often reigns supreme, because it's all about how the world perceives you. when you're standing on a pedestal. You know, you can't come and call yourself teaching, right? And you got stains on your shirt, your hair is unkept, right? You smelling bad. You have to be presentable, right? So a bishop has a certain presence about himself. It says, in the theater of public life, where perception often reigns supreme, the presence of a wife can be an invaluable asset for a man of high status. That will be a bishop, right? That will be a deacon. It says, beyond personal fulfillment, a spouse contributes to a careful, constructed public image, projecting stability, trustworthiness, and a relatable human dimension that resonates with conscientious investors and the general populace alike, right? And I don't like using that word human, but I'm using it for colloquial purposes because I know I'm talking to a vast audience, right? Because human actually means monster, right? But for colloquial purposes, right? So these are the these are the requirements for somebody that stands in a certain position, right? They must be able to be present themselves well. This advantage is rooted in a combination of societal expectations. So certain things are expected from a so-called bishop, a so-called deacon. It says psychological biases and the strategic amplification of a power couple dynamic. At its core, the public often views a married male leader, whether in the boardroom or the political arena, as more grounded and responsible, right? So marriage, that shows that you have somebody that you have to take care of, somebody that you have to be able to nurture. When you have, when a man has a family, that means he can relate to your average person. Like presidents, for instance, right? The majority, I don't think it has been no president that has not had a wife. That's so the general public, the people voting for him, know that they can relate to this man. They have wife and they have children. CEOs the same way. It says marriage traditionally symbolizes maturity, commitment, and a sense of duty to something beyond oneself. For a CEO, this can translate into greater investor confidence and more favorable credit ratings. Studies have shown that firms with married CEOs are often perceived as less volatile and more reliable, fostering a sense of security in their leadership in the political realm. A spouse is often a key player in the intricate dance of public perception. You see that? A visible and supportive wife can soften a politician's image, making him appear more compassionate and family oriented. These are all qualities of a bishop that is talking about in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2. So this bishop must at least have a wife, right? This family man's persona is a powerful tool for connecting with voters on an emotional level, transcending policy debates and ideological divides. The marital status of political candidates is a significant demographic that pollsters and campaign strategists closely monitor, as it can sway voting blocs. Historically, the American public has shown a preference for married leaders, viewing them as more stable and dependable figures to helm the nation. You see that? To lead the nation. The same thing with a bishop. The same thing with a deacon. The concept of the power couple further elevates the public standing of a high status man. When a wife is not merely a passive figure, but an accomplished individual in her own right, their combined influence can be formidable. This dynamic creates a narrative of a partnership of equals, a team that is greater than the sum of its parts. The public becomes invested in their story, following their joint endeavors. And we know this to be true in the Christian church, right? You understand when a pastor comes from another church or another city, another town, you want to hear the rundown on him. What's his life? Is he married? Does he have children? Right? How long has he been in the ministry? These are things, the resume that a bishop has right here. And on that resume, he must have at least one wife. It says this mutual reinforcement of prestige can open doors to new social circles, philanthropic opportunities, and influential platforms, all of which burnish the man's public image. Case studies throughout history underscore the profound impact a wife can have on a leader's public career, right? So the woman plays a part. Women play a big part in this thing. So don't feel that you're, like, man, what am I to do? Women play a big role in the building of a nation, a major role in the building of a nation, right? So this is not to cut women short, right? We're just talking about the law, what's allowed, what's not allowed, the guidelines. The poised and intelligent presence of a first lady, for instance, has often been instrumental in shaping a president's legacy, from Eleanor Roosevelt's advocacy for civil rights to Michelle Obama's focus on health and education. These women have not only supported their husbands, and this is what a wife should be doing, supporting her husband. If your husband is trying and working on building the kingdom, go to your husband and say, what can I do to assist you? Be that helpmeet to your husband. Help him establish the kingdom, right? It says these women have not only supported their husbands, but also carved out their own spheres of influence, thereby enhancing the overall positive perception of the administration. Conversely, the absence of a wife can at times create a subtle undercurrent of public skepticism. So you look at the majority's bishops, they're all say they're celibate. And we see the whole, we see what happens in the Catholic Church, right? Behind the celibacy. We see all the scandals that come behind of not having at least one wife, right? You go into all types of devious lust. While societal norms are evolving, an unmarried male leader may face unspoken questions about his personal life and stability. This is not to say that an unmarried man cannot be successful or trusted, but he may have to work harder to project the same sense of groundedness and relatability that a married man often enjoys by default, right? Because when you're married, you understand that being a married man comes with responsibility. That's what a bishop must be able to be, responsible. A deacon must be able to be responsible. And that's what a wife and having a family does. It shows responsibility. The presence of a wife in the public eye offers a multifaceted advantage to a man of high status. She is a symbol of stability and trustworthiness, a humanizing force in the often impersonal world of power, and a partner in the construction of a compelling public narrative. In the court of public opinion, a supportive and visible spouse can be a high status man's most effective and enduring ally. Let me repeat that again for the sisters that may have not heard this. A supportive and visible spouse can be a high status man's most effective and enduring ally. And that's what we need, sisters. Brothers need for you to be, we need for you to be our allies. Not our foes, but our allies. Our helpmeet. That's what we're asking for you, from you. In 7th century Arabia, where unlimited polygyny was common, Islamic law restricted the practice. The Quran permits a man to marry up to 4 wives, but only under strict condition that he treat them all with perfect justice and equality, a condition many scholars argue is nearly impossible to fulfill. And actually, let me actually pull up another verse as well. I'm going to go to, let me see, what is it? A verse came to mind. Ecclesiasticus, chapter 36. Let me see, and let's see. Let me see what was it I want. Salaki, bear with me. Okay, yeah, Ecclesiasticus 36. Let me pull it up on the screen. Let me see. I'll pull it up out of the. 16:11. So this is from the Apocrypha. Let me put it just on the screen real quick. And this is this verse right here I'm pulling up. This is just to further prove the point. To further drive 1 Timothy 3:2 home. Let me share my screen real quick. So this is Ecclesiasticus out of the Apocrypha, also known as Sirach, for those who are not familiar. So Ecclesiasticus chapter 36 and verse 26. Who will trust a thief well appointed, that skippeth from city to city? That's a question right there. Who will believe a man that hath no house? That goes back to a bishop or a deacon. If you don't have a household that you are going to run, how can the people, the congregation, the citizens, how can they believe you? If you don't have nothing that you are ruling over, you don't have a household that you're ruling over. It says, who will believe a man that hath no house and lodgeth wheresoever the night taketh him? So who's going to believe that man? Who's going to believe that bishop? Who's going to believe that deacon if he doesn't have a household, right? Let me see. What you have to understand, sisters out there, right? When you become one flesh with your husband, you now become your husband's, you're now your husband's possession. Let me actually pull that up real quick, because I don't want to say anything that I cannot prove through the scripture. Because I can hear Eve right now. I ain't nobody possession. Ain't nobody Let's go to Ecclesiasticus chapter 37. And let me see, what verse is it? Let me see. Actually, let's read verse 11 through the Spirit. Let's read verse 11 first. Let's go, Ecclesiasticus 37. And let's touch on verse 11 real quick about jealousy. Let me see. So it says, neither consult with a woman touching her of whom she is jealous. So women, you can't have that jealous spirit right there. You can't have that jealous spirit. You know, your sister wife, right? Or if your husband wants to get another wife, don't start getting jealous. Don't do that. Let's see. Let's go to is it Ecclesiasticus 36. That's actually what I wanted. Ecclesiasticus 36, and I think I want to start at verse. Let's see. Yeah, don't get jealous. Don't let go of that jealous spirit. 36. Okay, yes. So a possession. So sisters, when you marry a man, you now become that man's possession, right? You belong to that man. And you have to accept this. If you call yourself an Israelite, you call yourself a repentant Israelite. That means that mindset, that mentality that you had in the world, you have to get rid of it, right? That rebellious, that combative spirit, you have to get rid of it and now submit to your husband, because you are now your husband's possession. You belong to him, right? And a husband can have many cars, right? He can have 3, 4, 5, 6 cars. Those are his possession. A husband can have, more than one watch, right? He has a Rolex right here. He may have a G-Shock over here. Those are his possessions. You are his possessions, and you should be happy to be your husband's possession. Meaning that now someone has claimed you. You belong to someone. You're not just out running about anywhere, right? This is so important that you understand this. So this is Ecclesiasticus chapter 36 and verse 24. And it reads, he that getteth a wife beginneth a possession, a help like unto himself. That means you now become that, like how we just read in 1 Timothy, we went through the breakdown of 1 Timothy 3:2, right? That woman now becomes a high status woman because she's with a high status man. You are now in that position of being that man's helper, his help, not on your own separate accord, your own separate page. It says, he that getteth a wife begetteth a possession, a help like unto himself, and a pillar of rest. Let me read that one more time. And a pillar of rest. Not a pillar of stress, but a pillar of rest. That's what you want to be to your husband. A pillar of rest and not a pillar of stress. It says, where no hedges, there the possession is spoiled. So a lot of women are spoiled out there, meaning they are no good. Like how milk was spoiled. If it don't get used by a certain day, that's sisters out there. You become spoiled if you don't have a hedge, meaning you don't have a husband. It says, and he that hath no wife will wander up and down mourning. So this thing is so important. So important. Let me go to let me give another scripture real quick. Because we got to really understand the importance of we have to really understand the importance of marriages, right? I'm going to go to the book of Leviticus. Leviticus chapter, and I didn't put this in a slide, but you know, through the Spirit, some of these scriptures are just kind of coming to my mind. Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 29. Leviticus 19 and 29. And it reads, do not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a whore, lest the land fall to whoredom, and the land become full of wickedness. Now, sisters, the scripture says, do not prostitute thy daughter. When a father allows his daughter to have boyfriends, right? And then that daughter breaks up with the boyfriend, and then she goes on to another boyfriend, then to another boyfriend. And her heart keeps getting broken and broken and broken and broken. That's a father prostituting his daughter. Because once you lay down with a woman, that's now your wife. That woman now belongs to somebody. But because we have been raised up on Babylon, we have been raised up on the ways of this world, it's being taught that you can have boyfriends, girlfriends. You can be 80 years old talking about, this is my girlfriend, that's my girlfriend, that's my boyfriend. 70, 80 years old talking about boyfriend and girlfriend. Like, what are we doing? Are we in high school still? So when a woman leaves a man and goes on to the next, that's her being prostituted right there. That's you getting passed from one man to another man to another man to another man. And then what happens next? It says, lest the land fall to whoredom. Now we have whole culture now, right? We have the sexy reds of the world. We have the Glorillas of the world. We have the Cardi B's of the world. It's now a whole culture right now. It's all about busting and popping something open, right? Want to show that ill nana. It says, lest the land fall to whoredom and the land become full of wickedness. That's all we see on Hollywood is wickedness. Our sisters dress with shorts that show their cheeks. Sisters showing all parts of their skin and flesh. That's the land becoming full of wickedness, right? Let's go to I got this. Let's go to the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy. Let me see. Deuteronomy chapter 23. Let's see. Let's go to verse. Let me see what verse we're gonna get. Let's go to verse 17. Now these are commandments that we are reading, right? It says, there shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel. Let's just stop right there. Let's just digest that. There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel. That means that's not just talking about a woman selling herself for money. That's talking about having boyfriends, girlfriends. You can't just go around sleeping with any and everybody. I remember one time at camp, I had a sister, you know, it was an attractive sister too. Young, she was young, maybe like 24, 25 years old. Sad case, right? This sister, she gonna say to me, all she wants to do is do drugs, right? All she want to do is do drugs and have sex, have coitus. That's all she wants to do. Do drugs and have coitus, right? It was a shame, a low down, dirty shame. That's what it was, right? Let's go. Let's finish that verse up. It says, "Nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel," and we know that goes hand in hand. Whores and sodomites, they go hand in hand. Whores and sodomite, hand in hand, right? Let's pull back up the presentation. Okay, it says, "Beyond the Middle East and Europe, polygyny was a common feature of social organization in many parts of the world. In numerous pre-colonial societies across sub-Saharan Africa, a man's wealth and status were often measured by the size of his family, which, with multiple wives, providing a larger labor force for agricultural work. In imperial China, emperors and nobles maintained households with one official wife and a number of concubines to ensure a male heir and display power. Among many indigenous peoples of the Americas, polygyny was also practiced, often by chiefs and great warriors, as a sign of status and a means of forming alliances." You see this? This has always been practiced. Always been practiced throughout time. Let's see when everything changed. The Greco-Roman roots of mandated monogamy. The Greco-Roman roots of mandated monogamy. Because this part right here is going to really address the sisters out there that are Babylonian Israelites, that are Greco-Roman Israelites. You're not Hebrew Israelites, you're Greco-Roman Israelites, right? Because you're under mandated monogamy. And this is what you want a man to do, be under mandated monogamy. It says, the widespread legal requirement for monogamy in the Western world and beyond is not an ancient default, but a specific historical development. Its foundations were laid not in the ancient Near East, but primarily in the cultures of ancient Greece and Rome, where monogamy was sanctioned for specific social, political, and economic reasons. The Greek model, citizenship and order in ancient Greece, particularly in city-states like Athens, from the 5th century BCE onward, marriage was intrinsically linked to the concept of citizenship. So we can kind of see that today. We got people that will go to you go to an African shop and Miss Fufu says she's braiding your hair, right? And she say, you got any dudes, any guys that want to make 10 bands real quick? If they just marry my cousin who's in Timbuktu somewhere, I'll pay you X amount of dollars for citizenship. That's what they do it for. That's the same thing that was happening in Greco-Rome. It was put in place for citizenship. A legal marriage was a union between one man and one woman for the explicit purpose of producing legitimate children who could inherit their father's property and, crucially, his status as a citizen. While powerful men might have relationships with courtesans or hetairai, or female slaves, that's another name for a female slave, only the children from their one legal wife were considered legitimate heirs. This strict, legally monogamous framework was designed to bring order to society by creating clear, indisputable lines of descent. It prevented endless disrupts over inheritance and maintained the integrity of the citizen body, polis, which was seen as a closed, privileged group, right? If you're just coming in, please like or dislike, right? To the channel, but let your yay be yay and nay be nay, right? The Romans solidified this model and gave it the legal force that would shape Western civilization for the Roman Republic and later the Empire. And I promise you, I do be trying to pronounce these names before I put it on. Isustum matritonomium, a just or legal marriage, that's what that means right here, was a cornerstone of civil society and could only exist between one Roman citizen man and one Roman citizen woman. The purpose was clear: to produce legitimate children. who would carry on the family name, the nomen, and traditions and inherit the family estate, the patrimonium, right? Under the first Roman Emperor Augustus, this social custom was enshrined in state policy. You see, monogamy was enshrined in state policy. Just how you have to go to the courthouse in modern day because it's policy, and you got to go to the judge and get that letter get that thing signed that you're married. This is the same thing happened back then. This is where it all came from. It says, concerned about the declining birth rates among the Roman elite, Augustus enacted the Lex Julia de Maritandis Ordinibus around 18 BCE. I almost had it. It almost flowed clearly off my tongue. So this is why this was mandated, monogamy, because of the low birth rate of Esau. The same way it is today. Esau has a low birth rate the same way they had back then. It says this law, along with subsequent legislation, actively penalized the unmarried and childless. Same way today with taxes, right? If you are unmarried and you have no children, you don't really get no tax breaks. This is where all this stuff stems from right here. If you was unmarried, no children, you get no tax breaks. It says childless while providing political and social advantage to men who were married and had multiple children. Let me read that again. This law, along with subsequent legislation, actively penalized the unmarried and childless while providing political and social advantages to men who were married and had multiple children within a monogamous union, i.e. tax time. This is, when you follow these customs and you don't follow the customs of the Bible, the Torah, what the Most High put in place, you are literally saying, you are literally worshiping Baal. Because these are his mandates right here. You are literally worshiping, and you know, for those that don't know, Lord, it means Baal. We don't use that word Lord at all because it's calling upon a deity, right? And we have numerous classes about that, numerous classes. Please like, share, and ask for hit the bell for the notifications because we have classes all about talking about Lord, right? But I nevertheless, if you go into a marriage, you're literally doing that through Esau. You're literally doing that only for tax benefits and for write-offs. That's it. It says by making marriage a matter of state interest and legally defining it as singular union. You see that? One man, one wife, happy life. Rome created a powerful and enduring legal precedent. Polygyny was not only socially unacceptable, legally impossible. A man married to one woman could not legally marry another. And this is where the whole concept of a side chick comes from, a side piece. Don't be no side piece, woman. Don't do that. Don't lower yourself, lower your value, right? You become that man's dirty little secret. It says this Roman legal framework became the foundation upon which all subsequent European marriage law was built. You see that? European marriage. So you are literally a European Israelite, a Eurolite. That's what you are. You're a Eurolite. You're not an Israelite. You are a Eurolite. Okay, Christian sanctioning and global enforcement. You see this? Man, I guess the brothers, man, y'all must be ducking off to listen to this class because the numbers are going up and down for the viewers and stuff. You know, you must be trying to hide and get away from your wife, you know. But let's move on. It says while the Roman Empire provided the legal skeleton for monogamy, it was Christianity that provided its theological soul, transforming it from a civic requirement into a divine mandate. And they say you shouldn't mix what church and state, but this is what they literally did. They are not church and state. Yeah, church and state. They literally did this. They mixed church and state. the Roman Empire with Christianity being mixed together now to create to mandate monogamy. It says the early church and theological framing as Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, early Christian communities absorbed the prevailing Greco-Roman legal and social norms. The church fathers, influential theologians of the first few centuries, began to construct a powerful theological rationale for monogamy. This is how you got polluted, brain polluted. These classes are so you can be now washed. Your brain can be cleansed because it's been greatly polluted with Greco-Roman traditions and ideologies and philosophies. While they acknowledge the polygyny of the Old Testament, and that's another thing right there. You know, Christians, that's the main thing they want to run to. They say the Old Testament is done away with. We're no longer under that anymore. We don't listen to the Old Testament, but they sure want to keep them Old Testament law of paying your tithes, right? That ain't done away with, but everything else is done away with, but not that law on tithes. What they say? Will a man rob God? Right? Right? That's what they do. It says they argue that it belonged to an earlier era under a different covenant. That's literally what they say. That's literally what they say. A key figure in this development was St. Augustine of Hippo. He taught that the sacramental nature of Christian marriage was a symbol of the indivisible union between Christ and his one church. This is what he teaches. Just as Christ, and this is how he would have said it, just as Christ could have only one bride, the church, a Christian man, could have only one wife. You see that? Only one wife, brother. This powerful analogy elevated monogamy from a mere social or legal contract to a sacred mystery reflecting the divine order. This theological argument, combined with the Pauline injunction that church leaders be the husband of one wife. That's what they started saying. They took Paul's epistle in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 2, and they weaponized it by saying you can only have one wife. Right? And if you're just joining in, you have to play it back because we broke down that 1 Timothy 3 and 2. Creating an overwhelming conscience that monogamy was the only acceptable form of Christian marriage. So if there's brothers out there, sisters out there that are teaching this who call themselves Israelites that are teaching this doctrine, you're literally teaching a Christian doctrine. That's what you're teaching, a Christian doctrine. Formal condemnation and legal enforcement. For centuries, this was the accepted doctrine. This was the accepted doctrine of the church, but it was formally and unequivocally codified as binding law during the Counter-Reformation. At the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church issued a series of canons, church laws, to reaffirm its doctrines in response to the Protestant Reformation. Among them was a definitive condemnation of polygamy, Canon 2 of the Sacrament of Matrimony states, if any one saith that it is lawful for Christians to have several wives at the same time, and that it is not forbidden by any divine law, let him be anathema. Now let me show y'all what anathema means, because this was actually codified at the Council of Trent. Let me show you what that word anathema means. Let me pull up the etymology of that word anathema. Let me pull it up real quick. All right, bear with me. Let me share my screen. Remove, let me see. Screen. Okay. All right. Anathema. An accursed thing. That's what you are. It said, let him be an accursed thing. You see that right there? It says right here, you jump to the bottom. It says, by the time it reached Latin, the meaning of the Greek word had progressed through thing devoted to evil, to thing accursed or damned. Later, it was applied to persons and the divine curse. Hold up a second, y'all. Hold up. Because we want to say that we are born again and that we are reformed, right? Let's go back to this let's go back to this decree. It says, among them was a definitive condemnation of polygamy, Canon II, on the sacrament of matrimony states. So this is Esau telling you how you going to get married, right? It says, if anyone saith that it is lawful for Christians to have several wives at the same time, and that it is not forbidden by any divine law, let him be anathema, meaning you are an evil thing. So that's what they're saying today. If a brother just teaches the Bible, you're an evil thing because you're talking about a man having more than one wife. This is how deep this thing goes right here. This is you literally following the ways of Baal right here. Right? And we spell it because the scripture tells us not to make mention of the name of other deities, of other powers. That's why we spell this thing out. For those that may just be joining, but please check out the classes that we have talking about these things, right? It says this declaration officially made polygyny a heresy. So right now, what I'm teaching right now is a heresy, according to the Catholic Church. It says punishable by excommunication, anathema, as the church's canon law held immense power throughout Europe. This solidified monogamy as the only legally and spiritually permissible form of marriage across the continent. Global spread through colonialism, being the 15th century, this legally and theologically reinforced model of monogamy was exported globally through European colonism. As colonial powers established control over the Americas, Africa, and Asia, they imposed their own legal framework and religious values on colonized people. Viewing local customs like polygyny as uncivilized and immoral. Colonial administrators and missionaries worked systematically to eradicate them. They passed laws making polygyny illegal, refused to recognize the children of polygynous unions as legitimate heirs, and made conversion to Christianity contingent on a man abandoning all but one of his wives. Do you understand that right there? So if you was a tribe, right, and you had multiple women and stuff, you took care of them, all the women, it was a big sisterhood, everybody loved each other and everything like that. You know, Europeans came in there and said, you know what, all them wives got to go. You only can keep one now. Imagine that, women. You have a whole collection of shoes, right? And the federal government kicks down your door, goes into your closet, and say you get rid of all them shoes, all them purses. You only can have one purse. You can have one pair of shoes. You will lose your mind because them shoes are your possession. Them bags are your possession. So these men that lost their wives, that's them losing their possession. This is a heavy thing right here. We talking about that we ready for the kingdom and stuff like that. We ready for Hamashiach Yahushua to come back. But if you have a mindset where you are going to be trying to say you ain't going to have that, you ain't having none of that, you don't got the mindset of Hamashiach Yahushua. Because we always get Christians that say, oh, you know what? Why y'all talking about color? Color don't matter, right? Why you always talking about the color of Hamashiach Yahushua? They say Jesus Christ, but they say, why you always talking about the color? The color don't matter. Well, it's in the Bible, so it matters. Relationships and how to govern relationships and multiple wives, it's in the Bible, so it matters. everything that the Most High wrote with his finger, it matters. Right? Because don't let us get on you and tell you that it don't matter. Don't let a brother get on a sister and say it don't matter. It don't matter what you look like. Let two homegirls, right? They get ready to go out to the club, right? And they say, what should you wear? They say, oh, it don't matter. No, you're gonna lose your mind. You're gonna say, oh, what type of homegirl are you? What type of friend is you? Right? I want to be looking good. I want to be looking right. So that's how selfish we are right here. And when you learn to get over your selfishness, you will then receive the spirit of Hamashiach Yahushua. Because Hamashiach Yahushua he wasn't selfish. He gave himself freely to us. He gave himself freely to the children of Israel. He wasn't selfish. So how are we going to now be selfish, right? See, where was I? It says they passed laws making polygyny illegal, refused to recognize the children of polygynous unions as legitimate heirs, and made conversions of Christianity contingent on a man abandoning all but one of his wives. This process was the primary driver behind the global criminalization of polygyny. Now they make you a criminal now, right? You got more than one wife, you're going to get arrested. I think they got, what's that law called? That law is called, oh man. I can't think of the law when you marry, I don't know why I want to say bigotry, but that's not the law. It's a law when you try to marry another woman. It's like they make it illegal for you, right? Where you now got to face being in prison if you want to go through their system and marry another woman. But we understand that sex is marriage. Once you lay down with a woman, that's your wife now. It says this process was the primary driver behind the global criminalization of polygyny and the establishment of monogamy as the near universal legal standard it is today. So, addressing common misconceptions about polygyny. Let's address some of these things. Polygyny addressing common misconceptions about polygyny due to its unfamiliarity in many modern Western cultures. Polygyny is often subject to significant misconceptions and stereotypes. A clearer historical understanding requires addressing some of these common points of confusion. Misconception number 1. The primary motivation for polygyny is sexual gratification, right? That's a misconception right there, right? Because once the thrill is gone, right, you got to find something that's going to keep the relationship going, right? And it's not just about coitus. It's not just about that. What are your likes? What are your dislikes? And these are things that brothers have to learn in monogamous marriages, right? I'll be the first to admit, these are things that I have to learn. I'm continuing to learn, right? Because when you know better, you do better, right? So this can also happen in a monogamous marriage as well. It says the primary motivation for polygyny is sexual gratification. While sexuality is a component of marriage, viewing historical polygyny solely through this lens is inaccurate. For most of history, polygynous unions were driven by far more pragmatic concerns. These included economic production. More wives and children meant a larger workforce for agriculture. Political alliance, marrying daughters of other leaders to create treaties. Social status, a large family was a visible sign of wealth and power. And lineage survival, taking a second wife to ensure a male heir or marrying a brother's widow to care for her and preserve the family line. As we read in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5 on down, right? Misconception number 2. These pictures I use, right? This is what I think, what sisters think about when they think about polygyny, right? They think about the whole being a battered woman and you in the kitchen and you got your little rolling pin and you about to make some bread all day and you pregnant and barefoot. This is what this was in my mind how I thought women be thinking, right? When they think about being in a polygynous relationship. Well, women in polygynous marriages are always oppressed and powerless. This is a broad oversimplification that ignores the complexity of female roles across different cultures. While these societies were often strongly patriarchal, women were not universally powerless. In many African and Israelite households, for example, a senior wife held considerable authority, managing the other wives, controlling household resources, and acting as a respected matriarch. Women often had clearly defined rights regarding property and their children, and the support of their own kin provided a degree of protection. Right, hold on, Salakia, bear with me real quick. Let me see. Right. Actually, I'll pull that scripture in a second. It says the experience of women vary immensely based on cultural norms and individual circumstances. Right. And some homework for you sisters. Proverbs, the 31st chapter. You want to scream about being a Proverbs 31 woman, but the Proverbs 31 woman was a woman that had authority, a woman that managed. She wasn't doing this stuff by herself. Don't think a Proverbs 31 woman is talking about a woman that did all these things by herself. No, she had women that did as she told them to do, right? So that could have been another wife. That could have been concubines. It could have been whatever. But that Proverbs 31 woman knew how to govern other women. That's literally what that's talking about right there. She wasn't the only one just doing all that type of stuff, because that's the misconception of it. And you see sisters put on their profiles, they're a Proverbs 31 woman. You're not a Proverbs 31 woman. You're more like what was it? Ecclesiastes 26 and 23 woman, right? A wicked woman. That's what a lot of women are like, the wicked woman. But they think that they're a Proverbs 31 woman. But you're really a Ecclesiastes 26 and 23 woman. Let's move on. Misconception number 3. Polygyny is exclusively an Islamic or Mormon practice. This misconception arises from modern headlines, but it ignores the vast global history of the practice. As this article has detailed, polygyny was widespread in ancient Israel long before the advent of Islam. It was a common institution in countless pre-colonial African societies throughout much of imperial China and other parts of Asia, and among numerous indigenous cultures of the Americas. Limiting its identity to one or two religious groups erases its true historical and anthropological scope. Misconception number 4. Polygynous households are inevitably filled with jealousy and conflict. Hey, life is what you make it, right? If you want to spend a lot of your energy being jealous over another woman, when both of y'all, or 3 of y'all, or all 4 of y'all all belong to that same man, you are literally bringing yourself to an early death with all that stress that you're building up in your heart, right? Because that man, he look, hopefully you prove a man right and he cares for all y'all and love y'all all the same, right? But if he doesn't, you know, he has to do what he has to do according to the law, right? But if he doesn't like a woman, like a wife, he likes one wife other than another wife, hey, you should have chose better. You know, that's all I can say. You should have chose better, right? You got to hold a man to the law. That's what this is about, because the law is indifferent. It says the potential for conflict between co-wives is real and is documented in historical texts, including the biblical stories of Sarah and Hagar and the warnings in the Apocrypha. However, it is not the only possible outcome. Many societies have established cultural rules and hierarchies to minimize friction. Furthermore, co-wives could and often did form strong bonds of corporations and mutual support, creating a sisterhood. That's what this is all about, creating a sisterhood. Stop always thinking the negative, right? Start thinking positive. Stop thinking on the left-hand side and start thinking on the right-hand side. Think about the sisterhood. What can this bring to the house? How can this make our lives better, right? Stop only thinking about yourself and being selfish. Me, 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 me. I. That's mine, 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 mine. No, the man belongs to Hamashiach Yahushai. And Hamashiach Yahushai belongs to the Most High. And the woman belongs to the man. It's not the other way around. Stop being a pillar of stress to your man. It says that shared the immense burdens of domestic labor, farming, and child rearing. A functional polygynous household often relied as much on the cooperation between women as it did on the authority of the husband. So you need to pick a man, right? You need to give yourself over to a man that's a righteous man, that knows the Most High. Because when he knows the Most High, guess what? He has to live by a certain litmus, which is the scriptures, the Bible. He has to live by a certain standard of guidelines, which is the Bible, right? I'm proud to say that myself, I've never left a woman before. If any woman leaves, it's because they leave, right? And this is the mindset that men should have, right? You shouldn't be quick to put a woman away, right? Unless it's for fornication. It's for adultery, right? Men got to stand 10 toes down on this thing right here. And then if a woman does leave, you know, she could come back as long as she didn't lay with a man, right? You can accept her back. So if a man does have a reason for putting his wife away, bring your woman back. If you do put her away, bring her back. You know, don't let her be gone forever unless it's her choice. Put that inside of the woman's corner, right? Polygyny in the modern world, practice and debate. Despite being illegal in most nations, polygyny continues to exist in the 21st century, both as a legally sanctioned practice in some countries and as subculture or religious practices in others. Its modern existence is often at the center of complex debates involving law, religion, and human rights. In Western countries where polygyny is illegal, it is most famously associated with fundamentalist Mormon splinter groups. The mainstream Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS, officially renounced polygamy in 1890 as a condition for Utah statehood. However, various fundamentalist groups broke away to continue the practice, believing it to be a divine commandment. And it is a commandment. It is a divine commandment. According to Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5 on down, it's a commandment. Proponents in the modern era advanced several arguments in favor of decriminalizing or practicing polygyny, which they should, because you can marry any and everything today. But when a man wants to marry more than one woman, all of a sudden you have the scarlet letter A on you. It says one common argument is based on a demographic imbalance, suggesting that a surplus of women in society may be unable to find husbands with a strictly monogamous system. Sisters, this is your selfishness right here. And this is why sisters don't be liking each other, because you're so selfish. Here it is, you have a surplus of women and not enough men to go around. Because a majority of these men are either in prison. A majority of these men now are homosexuals. A majority of these men now are dealing with Becky. So what does that lead? That's going to lead a whole bunch of women that don't have a head, that don't have a hedge, that are left unprotected, right? Other arguments are rooted in claims of religious freedom, asserting that plural marriage is a divinely sanctioned practice that should be protected under law. Proponents also cite personal liberty and freedom of choice, arguing that consenting adults should be free to structure their families as they see fit without government interference. Finally, some suggest that polygynous households can create a larger, more resilient support network for women and children, with co-wives sharing domestic economic and child rearing responsibilities. Right, so that is the end of the slides right here. I'm going to put a link in the chat for any questions, comments, or just, whatever you want to say about it, right? Let me stop sharing my screen. So if any brothers want to come on stage, or if any sisters that if you're married, if you get permission from your husband, you can come on stage, right? And I'll leave that up for a second. Because what I plan to do, what's coming in the future is I want to talk about, relationships. Relationships are important. Where the status of relationships are going, in our nation, right? Because that's something very important is the nucleus. The nucleus is really being broken up. It's being broken up because we don't understand each other. Man does not understand woman, woman understand man, and now we left with what you see today. We all seen those viral clips of those men dressed in red dresses, red skirts, right? You got a whole bunch of young men wearing mini skirts and tutus and stuff like that, putting the blicky inside of there. YNs running around in skirts and tights and stuff like that. The relationship status is all off. And it's up to men to stand up. It's up to men to stand up. We got to have a backbone, brothers out here, right? And it comes with addressing the elephant in the room. A lot of men, you look at other women. Just be honest. You look at women catch your eye and stuff like that. And you can't be afraid of the dragon in your house. You can't let her be the one that dictates and jacking you up and pushing you around and say you're not going to have that, right? Because a lot of times, once you get it and stuff like that, you're like, oh man, this ain't really all cracked up what you want it to be, But who knows? Who knows? But we have to live by what the scripture says, right? We have to live by what the scripture says. The scriptures allow it. The Most High allows it. He permits it, right? I'm gonna put a 30-second timer on in case anybody want to click the link, and if not, then I am going to log off. Let me see. Let me give y'all 30 seconds. Man, no smoke, huh? No smoke. I thought there was going to be some smoke off this class right here. Well, with that, I want to say Kwam Abanaw Yahweh, Kwam Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, Kwam Yasha'Allah. The next class will be the elders on the fourth day at 7 p.m. Then the class again on the sixth day at 7 p.m. And then we got camp on the seventh day on Hollywood. Like, dislike, share, subscribe. And with that, shalom.